Hello and welcome to the Circling the Bases podcast. My name is DJ Short, and honestly, I should say welcome back. Actually, we've been on a bit of a hiatus since the end of the World Series and through the holidays, but the show is back with pitchers and catchers just a couple of weeks away from reporting to their respective camps in Florida and Arizona. Yes, the 2023 MLB season is going to be here before you know it. And if you've followed this show over the years, you should know that usually means it's time for our annual position preview series, going position by position and identifying our top options, undervalued and overvalued players, young players to watch, much, much more. And joining me for this year's series is a good friend of the show, Scott Pianowski from Yahoo. Scott, thanks so much for joining me here. Very excited to have you a part of the show.
Thanks for having me, DJ. Great to see you again, talk some baseball,
Sure.
which means, I'll be punching up that Roto World news page every day. And, of course, fantasy baseball is open as we speak at Yahoo Sports. So get your band back together, get your league set up, and a lot to go over, man. We're going to do first base today, and it's a fun position. It's a little bit of a top-heavy position, but a lot of guys to sort through. And this will – I'll be very open about this. I mean, we're putting this out there to help everybody draft, but I'm just looking forward to picking your brain and seeing where we disagree and where we agree, because I feel like that will make my personal draft prep all the more sharper and get me, in the shape I need to be to try to, go pound my leagues, win some money this year.
I feel the same way. When I do prep for these episodes, sometimes it's my own personal prep as well that I use in my draft. So it's very useful. I know there's a lot of bad stuff going on in the world, but it's nice to have sort of this distraction to go to. And fantasy baseball is just a game, but we take it seriously. We're trying to give you the best advice we can, but hopefully it's an escape for you. I know it is for me a lot of the time. So we are starting here at first base for this episode. And before we get started with specific names and rankings and that sort of thing, I just want to get your take on the state of the position. Just your general feeling about first base going into drafts and your prep this year. You said it's kind of a deeper position, a fun position, but as you start to go into those early drafts, you're like, I can wait on these guys, or, I want to be aggressive early, just that kind of thing.
Yeah, I always feel that I want to have a good offensive base on any of my teams, and generally I feel the outfielder is deeper than infield, although this year maybe the outfield isn't as deep as it usually is, but I find that corner infield picks, and we're not talking about third base today, but we'll get to them shortly enough in the series, are never bad early picks. Right now, there's, I think, 4 players in the top 30 at ADP at first base, and I'd like to draft, I hope, because I'll have several teams. I hope I have a Vladimir Guerrero team. I hope I have a Freddie Freeman team. Paul Goldschmidt's coming off an MVP year. Pete Alonso on that loaded Mets team. I'm going to be proactive in the infield. I'm going to be proactive at first base. That is not to say that there aren't bad guys you can get around pick 100, pick 150, pick 200, but they're your utility corner guys, right? They're your third option at the position. This is a position where if I'm going to break ties a lot of the times, it's going to be taking one of those infielders, taking one of those foundation guys at first base, because this is not a position where you don't say at the end of the year, oh, I found this first baseman out of nowhere. No, the best first basemen are guys you already know. They're on teams they're established players. If there's an MVP to be won by a first baseman, it's not going to be Anthony Rizzo. It's not going to be Josh Bell, although I like those guys at their respective ADPs, and we'll get to them later. But it's going to be one of the major vanity guys. So this is a position I think that spreads some chips.
That's a good point. We'll get started here in a minute. Before we do, a word for our listeners. Be sure to download the Roto World app to receive breaking news player updates all season long. Stay ahead of the competition by favoriting players on your roster. Get the latest injury updates, player news, and much more delivered right to your phone. It's available in your app store today, so definitely check it out.
Hang on, Matt. If you're in one of my leagues, don't check that out. If you're in a league I don't play in, you're welcome to use Roto World all you want, because time is money, man. You need to have this type of stuff. You need to get the alert before the guy in your league. So again, if you're not in my league, go nuts, download, use responsibly. If you're in my league, don't charge your phone, sleep late on the weekend, don't set a lineup. That's you're encouraged to play that way against me.
Right. A lot of things have gone out of style in the past 10 years, but the Roto World Player News app is still just as valuable as it's ever been. And especially to get those kind of alerts when you have to jump to the waiver wire real quick if there's an injured closer or anything like that,
Mm-hmm.
it's super valuable. So definitely keep that in mind. So let's start out here looking at what changed at the first base position during the offseason, sort of an in case you missed it to start us off at the top here. The biggest move, Jose Abreu. So he signs a 3-year, $58.5 million contract with the Astros, which is super interesting. Obviously, that deep lineup, that scary lineup, there's going to be all kinds of ducks on the pond there for Abreu, coming off a season where he fell off a bit power wise. But I love this fit. I'm wondering what you think, Scott.
Crazy about it. I mean, I know he's 36 now, each 36 season, but in their projected lineup, he's going to hit between Yordan Alvarez and Kyle Tucker. Talk about the catbird seat, and they have a bunch of high OBP guys who are ahead of them. This is maybe the 8 and 9 spots will be dead spots in this lineup, but when they have, it looks like Jeremy Pena is going to bat 7th right now as the lineup is constructed. This lineup goes 7 deep, and they're probably going to be the AL's highest scoring team. And I think Abreu is getting the right team at the right time. And he's somebody I'm willing to jump the line. I'm going to try to rank him above ADP and maybe skip a half round or a round on him or go a little bit extra in those salary cap drafts. I would like to be proactive on Jose Abreu. And I think the Astros, a team, look, I know people, it's a polarizing team because of what happened with them a few years ago, but it's a smart organization. It's such a deep roster. They're going to score runs by the truckload. You want a piece of this offense, and why not with Jose Abreu, who I think his early ADP is very reasonable.
It is. I mean, if he doesn't have 100 RBIs this year, I'm going to be shocked with that lineup. So the flip side of that, obviously, Jose Abreu had a very long tenure with the White Sox, but now Andrew Vaughn takes over first base there in Chicago, sort of was pigeonholed into left field when he made his major league debut. Not really where he belongs. I wonder if we see him make a leap here now that he can go to his more natural position, maybe be a bit more comfortable.
Yeah, I was all in on the White Sox last year, and just it feels like everything went wrong. Jose Abreu had a mediocre season. Giolito couldn't pitch for some reason. He was on a bunch of my teams that really went bad. Eli Jimenez got hurt again. Obviously, Tony La Russa was probably the wrong man at the wrong time. A Hall of Fame manager, but past his relevance date. So maybe it's a case of buying on the cheap with a lot of these guys. Now, Vaughn won't be cheap because he was really good last year, and it's a little maybe frustrating that he's probably going to hit 6th as the lineup is currently constituted. But again, a team I think goes about 7 deep, right? I mean, who wouldn't want Tim Anderson? That Benintendi's going to hit 2nd. He's a high OBP guy. I would love to see Jimenez just get a break from the injury gods. He hasn't had them. This is an offense I think it has the chance to be. I said Houston. I already gave Houston the run scoring title in the American League. I think the White Sox could have a puncher's chance to win that themselves. A lot of these guys won't be as expensive. Certainly Vaughn would be a lot more inexpensive in ADP than Jose Abreu would be. And this is another lineup I want to draft into proactively. In the case of Vaughn, if Abreu's age makes you concerned. I mean, Vaughn's just age 24. He'll turn 25 this year, so you're getting him. He's on the escalator. This is the type of player you like to draft. A young player who's got a ceiling, who hasn't had his best season yet, and that describes Andrew Vaughn.
So another big one here, a noteworthy one fantasy-wise, Josh Bell signed a 2-year, $33 million contract with the Guardians, and it was kind of a tale of 2 seasons for Bell. Last season started out great with the Nationals, then was traded to the Padres in the big Juan Soto deal, and his production, fell off a cliff. But what I like about Bell, just really solid plate discipline, fits in that Guardians lineup very well. We know how much they value making contact, but he adds an element of power as well. And I like him a lot because he's going to have those table setters in front of him as well. I think this is a great fit for the Guardians, who needed that sort of middle of the order bat. We saw that in the series against the Yankees during the playoffs. They really lacked that. I think Bell gives them some legitimacy there.
Yeah, I like the way you frame the Cleveland lineup, right? They do put the ball in play, and they do get on base a lot. They draw a lot of walks. As you said, it's a high OBP team, and Bell probably fits in the middle of that lineup right now, hitting behind Quan, Rosario, and Ramirez. The way they're constructed, another switch hitter for them. I like Terry Francona as a manager. You don't know how much power you're getting from Bell, but you have to look, he's going to score a lot of runs. He's in a lineup that maybe not as deep as that Houston-Chicago lineup, but a lineup that goes 6 deep at least, should be a plus offense. And you're going to get some of that value back in batting average, because I think this guy could hit maybe 300 in a good year, and I think 270 plus we have to reconfigure what we think about batting average. It used to be, oh, I don't want anybody who hits 240. Now it's like your team might hit 240 in a deeper fantasy league. So Josh Bell's maybe he won't hit the 35, 40 home runs, but he could hit 25, and he's going to be a plus player everywhere else. And he's still just age 30. Maybe we haven't seen his best season. I think it was a very sharp move by Cleveland, and I love the way he fits this current lineup.
And we also have to mention some of the changes in the rules this offseason. The shift change. Josh Bell's one of those guys, a lefty hitter who I think could benefit from that. Maybe you boost him up a few points. He already, makes a decent amount of contact. As we said, I think he's a sleeper pick to maybe hit 290, 300 this season.
You talk about Bell, obviously a switch hitter, but it's a right-handed league, so he's going to be batting left-handed most of the time.
Yeah.
The other day I was just having a little daydream that, maybe I'll draft a team of all left-handed hitters, thinking that they stand to benefit more for all switch hitters / left-handed hitters, because those are the guys who are getting killed by the shift. All the left-handed hitters getting shifted against. And I'm probably going to get booed or sacked by some of the sabermetric friendly people in the crowd, but I'm kind of excited about the shift change, because I just watching a player ground out to a keg party in right field is not satisfying to me. And look, I know why penalize teams for being smart, and the hitter should learn to adjust. But the pitching is so good now, and every team has all these fire-breathing dragons that come out of the bullpen. We don't ask the starting pitcher to go anywhere near as deep as he used to. It's so hard to hit. I don't mind them. And also, somebody would say, well, who cares? They're just trying to hit a home run anyway. They're not trying to hit a single to right field. But the bottom line is we're going to see more hits this season because the defensive positioning won't be as good. And I think it's a good thing. I miss a couple of singles. I don't mind that. And if batting average goes up, I think that will make the game a little bit more enjoyable. At least for me, it will.
I totally agree. And I speaking as someone who, sometimes I go to games in person, but if you watch it on TV, I think you're conditioned to a certain way of watching the game. I mean, you see a ground ball hit up the middle. I think we're used to seeing that ball go into center field. Right. But in recent years, that ball just gets gobbled up. It's a very jarring thing to watch on television. So I think it'll make it a more exciting game to watch with these shift changes. I'm not against it, especially if it helps us fantasy-wise.
Right.
A few smaller moves we had here as well. Will Myers signed with the Reds. Trey Mancini and Eric Hosmer, both to the Cubs. Brandon Belt signed with the Blue Jays. We had a couple even smaller moves than that. Dominic Smith to the Nationals. Carlos Santana to the Pirates. From some of these smaller moves, Scott, what is one of them that jumps out to you?
If Brandon Belt could ever get full, it's kind of a glass half full, glass half empty, because he may be a platoon guy in Toronto.
Yeah.
But if he's a platoon guy, he's only facing the right-handed pitching, so his ratio stats would be better. We know they're moving the fences in, that the dimensions are changing in Toronto. So I think a lot, and I think we're going to have a good debate about Freeman and Vlad Guerrero later. That's one of the kind of the hot points is, pick your guy. Who do you want? Because Toronto's lineup is deep and the fences are coming in. It just looks like, I'm giving every team in the American League, I'm going to say they're going to lead the American League in runs, but that Toronto lineup, how can you not look at it and be like, oh my God, I have to have some of these guys. And even if it goes down to what's a cheaper way I can get invested in the Toronto lineup, it might be Brandon Belt. I also think the Carlos Santana signing is interesting because he's still got good OBP skills. Another guy who's a switch hitter, maybe picks up a couple of hits from the shift. And the type of move that you see a smaller market team has to make, and maybe he'll get flipped at the trading deadline. I don't think Carlos Santana is out of relevance. I think he could be a nice. He won't be your headliner at first base by any means, but it could be a nice depth pick you get at a pretty good ADP.
Yeah, I like Will Myers in Cincinnati. I think in that ballpark, he's only a couple of years removed from being, a useful player in mixed leagues. I still think there's some possibility there. He's someone who could get traded if he gets off to a hot start. That's something to watch. But in that ballpark, I could see him really surprising some people. So
only 30 years old. He's still. I still think he might have 10 stolen bases in him too, which is a lot in today's day and age. So another park that anybody in Cincinnati, right? Anybody who's going to be in their lineup, you have to take some interest in because it's one of the 4 or 5 best parks. It could be easily the best offensive park this side of Coors Field, and so we always want to get an investment there if we can.
Yeah, and another rule change I wanted to mention here is, a lot of us are making that shift from fantasy football to fantasy baseball prep. Remember, there's going to be the pitch clock this year. There's going to be throw-over limits for pitchers. The bases are bigger than they've been in the past. A lot of people are anticipating an uptick in stolen bases. So that's something to think about, especially if you're looking at some of these like one-trick pony type of speedsters, I don't think there's the need for that quite anymore. If you can sort of cobble together, 10 stolen bases here, 20 stolen bases there, I think you can win a league that way. So it's another thing to keep in mind as we start to do our fantasy baseball prep this season. So next up here, let's get into some players we are fading this year, at least as far as late January, the best we can do. Players who, just looking at their current ADP, you're not going to necessarily want a piece of it. Not that they're a bust or anything like that, but you're not seeing them as a good value at their current average draft position.
Yeah, my first fade is Vinny Pasquantino, and it's hard to say this because he was great last year for Kansas City, and a lot of people like him, and he had more walks than strikeouts. Anybody who has more walks than strikeouts is a good hitter. But what makes me nervous is he came into the major leagues kind of late. He was never a prospect. And I talked about some of these other hitters who are in really good lineups. And the Kansas City lineup is good at the top of it, but after Vinny, and he's going to probably back clean up, it drops off a cliff. I think he's going to have trouble. Now, what does lineup protection mean? To me, it means I want buoyancy in the idea that guys in front of me are on base, guys behind me are driving me in, pitchers have to throw me strikes because they're concerned that if I get on base, somebody behind me is going to hit a 2-run home run. I'm just worried that the problems in this Kansas City lineup are going to hurt Vinny's production. And just when somebody, again, isn't a prospect, isn't drafted that high, he doesn't show up on the top 100 prospect lists, kind of pops at a late age, it just makes me nervous. Again, the walk strikeout thing, when I see that, I'm like, well, he has to be a good hitter. He's got that sweet swing too. But Kansas City's just, I think it's going to be a dead zone for fantasy. I know we all want drafted to Bobby Witt, and obviously Salvador Perez is a very good player at a weak position, but I'm afraid this is going to be a really bad offense. It's a player who had no pedigree before last year, kind of came out of nowhere. He's going in the top 100 right now in ADP, which he has to be good at that price. A little bit too pricey for me. I think I'm going to be out on Vinny Pasquantino during draft season.
I think he's going to hit. I think he's capable of hitting for average. And the plate discipline was so impressive for a rookie, first chance in the big leagues to do what he did. I have a little bit of question marks about how much power he can hit for, because if he's hitting 20 home runs, that might be slightly disappointing inside the top 100 relative to the other first basemen that are out there. And just looking at early drafts, Pasquantino has a ton of helium, a ton of hype, whereas I would maybe rather take Jose Abreu, like we were talking about earlier, more of a proven commodity. And even though there was the power drop from Abreu last year, he still hit the ball incredibly hard. It wouldn't shock me if he got back to 25 homers. And like I said, the lineup protection matters, like you were just mentioning with the Royals there. I mean, Pasquantino could put up similar quality of contact. He could hit for average, but he could get you 80 RBIs. Meanwhile, in the Astros lineup, Abreu could get you 100. To me, I agree with what you're saying. I think I still like Vinny a lot, but I think Abreu is going after Vinny in NFC drafts right now, which to me, I'm not quite ready to go there.
I'm so glad you put the spotlight on that. So in the current NFBC ADP that I have in front of me, Vinny Pasquantino is pick 93, ADP 93. Jose Abreu is pick 101. And I think that part of that speaks to one of the players coming off a rookie year. So he's a little bit of a shiny new toy, albeit Pasquantino was not a high-rated prospect, but whatever. He's a new guy, right? New thing, new player for us to draft into. Jose Abreu's been around forever. He's in his mid-30s. People don't go to their drafts wanting to draft these boring veterans. I used to put together, and this is a dated reference now, the Raul Ibanez All-Stars, just the boring veterans that would outkick their ADP year in and year out because people were kind of sick of drafting them because there was nothing exciting about them. They weren't buzzy prospects. They weren't young players. They weren't like maybe even MVP candidates. And that's what Jose Abreu is. He's a boring value veteran who's going to outkick his ADP. I actually think I think his ADP is probably going to rise. I think in the teeth of draft season, he's going to be around pick 80 to pick 95. He'll probably go up around. So if you're drafting, and this is one of the reasons why a lot of people don't want to draft early. They're like, well, I haven't done my prep yet. What if my guys get hurt? The reward of drafting early is that if there are mistakes in ADP, if players are mispriced, you can take advantage of them. I think Jose Abreu, outside top 100 picks, I think there's just a flat-out mistake. I want to pounce on that.
I totally agree. So my fade here is Jake Cronenworth, kind of looking more in the mid to late rounds of drafts. He was highly disappointing last season. Hit 239, got you 17 homers, 88 RBIs, 88 runs scored. So he was a compiler in a pretty good lineup there in San Diego, but he doesn't stand out in any one category. And just looking at quality of contact, he was 50th percentile or lower in pretty much everything. Max exit velocity, average exit velocity was 24th percentile, barrel percentage 29th percentile, hard hit percentage 18th percentile. Just not great. Has good sprint speed, but he doesn't really run. He had just 3 stolen bases last season. I know that there's the versatility thing that people like about Cronenworth, and on paper, again, Padres lineup looks really good, but I just don't see him standing out enough where, yes, you have that multi-position eligibility, but I feel like he's one of those players, especially in a more shallow league, where every week you're going to be saying to yourself, can I get somebody better than him? And I'm afraid drafting him that early is just not going to be worth it in the end.
No, I totally agree. I mean, it's like, what do you get here? Okay. Batting average, career 256 guy, hit 239 last year, which hurt you. Was he a power guy? Well, he slugged 390 last year. 17 home runs is okay. It's not great. Well, does he run? No, 3 or 4 stolen bases a year. And the Padres have such a deep lineup and such a deep roster that I don't think he's even guaranteed playing time. They're going to look, they signed Matt Carpenter. I know they like the idea of maybe him playing the outfield. Matt Carpenter could easily be a first baseman for them, take up some of the DH at bats. I don't think Cronenworth is married. I don't think he's somebody who's like, okay, he's playing 150. I know he has the last 2 seasons, but the depth of this roster, I could easily see him maybe losing some of his playing time because he doesn't have one skill to hang his hat on. Really, his best skill is versatility. And his best skill has been the availability of being caught up in that San Diego undertow, which I don't feel is a guarantee for a full season next year. He's an easy fade for me. His price would have to come. He'd have to go several rounds over his current ADP before I would consider drafting him.
So in that same area with Cronenworth, on NFC right now, it's 189.95. He's right in the area of like a Brandon Drury, DJ LeMahieu, depending on how healthy he is with the toe coming into spring training. But if LeMahieu is healthy, sitting at the top of that Yankees lineup, that's a place you want to invest in, obviously. And younger player Miguel Vargas with the Dodgers, I'm really into as well. We already mentioned Will Myers. I wouldn't be surprised if Myers put up similar counting stats as Cronenworth, if you really think about it. 15 to 20 homers, he can outsteal him, and a lineup that might be, could boost them enough where the counting stats are similar there, and you can get Myers several rounds later than Cronenworth. I see them kind of similar.
I do too. And we talked about Josh Bell earlier, who has about a equal ADP as Cronenworth right now. He's only 4 picks earlier. Or if you want to even jump ahead around and take Ty France, part of a deep Seattle lineup, or Rowdy Tellez, who a very underrated player in Milwaukee, although he mostly mashes righties, but so what? It's a right-handed world. You have a lot of options in this ADP pocket, which is why it's easy to fade Cronenworth at the current price.
So any other players you're looking at that, you're seeing this early ADP and you're like, I can probably get similar value later?
Yeah, that's the game you play a lot of times. It's like, well, here's a player I can get. Here's the stats I expect. Can I get those stats later? And when I look at Rhys Hoskins, I think to myself, he's Anthony Rizzo, and Anthony Rizzo is going to go several rounds later. Both of them in good ballparks, both of them ostensibly in deep lineups, although the Phillies will be without Bryce Harper for a while because they got Trey Turner in the lineup, which is great. And they have why can't I think of the guy who hits second for them, who's on base all the time? Kyle Schwarber. So that's a great OBP at the top of the lineup. But man, it's just frustrating not to have Harper for 3 or 4 months. But Hoskins is probably going to hit about 235, maybe hit 30 home runs. He hasn't been a great RBI guy lately, which is more of probably a fluke than anything else. But Anthony Rizzo, what do you have? 19 home runs, I want to say, in Yankee Stadium. Just goes to the perfect park at the perfect time. They realize it. He realizes it. Another guy, the boring veteran, right? He's in his mid-30s. Yep. Nothing exciting about Anthony Rizzo. I will take that discount all day. So this is part of making Rizzo a target for me, but it's also, I think, Hoskins. I see 2 similar players with like 40 or 50 pick gap in ADP. It doesn't make sense to me.
I agree with what you're saying there. You're preaching to the choir. So jumping over to the sort of buy target area with us, I think we each like Josh Bell there in Cleveland, like we mentioned earlier. I see 100 RBI season maybe for Josh Bell this season, and maybe 290, 300 batting average. I'm going to be targeting Josh Bell. I can say that first off. But another name that I like is Alex Kiriloff with the Twins. Might not qualify yet at first base, depending on what league you're playing in, but that should change really quickly. The Twins recently traded Luis Arias, the AL batting champ, to the Marlins, and that opens up an opportunity at first base there in Minnesota. And Kiriloff, once a former top prospect, but has failed to meet expectations due to injury, though, not underperformance, really. Nagging wrist issues, underwent wrist surgery last August, definitely impacted his quality of contact last season, but he has a great bat when he's healthy. Yes, hard to count on him, but he's just 25 years old. He's basically free in drafts. I think that Twins lineup is underrated, and Kiriloff could pay off really nicely. His current ADP on NFC is 448.49, so we're talking maybe drafted or maybe just a waiver wire pickup, but I could see him paying off really nicely. Depends on what he looks like in the spring. We'll see how healthy he is, but I could see him being a seriously buzzy name going into drafts this spring.
Yeah, a post-type sleeper, right? As you said, always had a pedigree and has an injury excuse. I mean, when your wrist isn't right, you can't hit for any power. So all of his stats, don't get in the weeds with the stats. You just throw them all out because he wasn't healthy. They want him to be their first baseman. They're going to give him every chance to win the job. And what could be a decent lineup. And as you said, they've moved some pieces around. So they want him to play 150 games. I think his upside is he could hit 30 to 35 home runs. And at the price, he's your last pick of a draft, or maybe when you put somebody on the injured list, you pick him up as a replacement, one of the first guys off the waiver wire in a medium or shallow league. Doesn't pan out, that's fine. You just drop him and pick up somebody else. But he's somebody I want to see what he does in the spring, and I would love for him to be on my roster in April, even if I don't need to play him. See where it goes, give him a month, see it, kick the tires on him a little bit. If he seems to be panning out, maybe he's in my lineup going forward. And if he doesn't, I'm sure there'll be all sorts of other guys I want to pick up. So I agree. This is what you're doing when you're targeting your late picks. You're looking for plausible upside, and Alex Kiriloff certainly offers that in 2023.
So we mentioned some of these names we like, Josh Bell, Anthony Rizzo, et cetera. Anybody else you're keeping your eye on at first base or corner infield late in drafts here?
Yeah, I mentioned Ty France in passing too, and a nod to our friend Chris Crawford, who's kind of made me a Seattle sympathizer. I like this team a lot. I really like the way this lineup is constructed, and I love having guys who bat early in a good lineup. France probably going to hit second in that lineup, so you get extra at bats. You have people around you who are on base and knocking you in. He had a better season 2 years ago than last year, but I still think he's somebody who could hit over 300, who contributes in a lot of different areas, and in an offense I want to invest in. And also, maybe I'm a night owl. I like to have a couple of West Coast guys too, and give me and Chris something to talk about during the season. So give me an inexpensive piece of that Seattle offense. Give me some Ty France.
Yeah. So let's jump to some young names to keep an eye on. I think these are mostly late round flyers, but I think there's some interesting stuff here. Miguel Vargas, I already mentioned him a little bit, has done nothing but hit in the minors. 313 hitter, has always hit for average, but he's added some power over the last 2 seasons, really putting him on the radar in dynasty leagues and prospect lists in general. The Dodgers let Justin Turner walk during the offseason, signed with the Red Sox. So there is a good chance that Vargas plays a significant role this season. And I'm pretty into this because, we're talking about wanting to get a piece of a lineup, and, to get Vargas, the Dodgers lineup, not quite as fearsome as maybe they've been in the past. They have some question marks, but Vargas to me is pretty interesting.
No, I agree. And actually, I'm still in on this lineup. I obviously lose a Trey Turner. It's a big hit, but and first base is a different position than other prospect positions or young player positions because it's more of a veteran driven position. It's very rare. What happens is, like, when you see the Major League Baseball draft, right? And so many guys are drafted at shortstop, and they move off the position and they become outfielders. They become second baseman. They become third baseman or first baseman or whatever it is. So this won't be as buzzy. The first base rookie or ascending player list won't be as exciting as other positions, just the shape of the way baseball is. But still a lineup I'm interested in. And now that he's with Turner gone and everything, I could see him. Vargas is somebody I would want to be drafting into proactively where he's going currently.
Yeah, I'd actually, if you wanted to take a futures bet, Miguel Vargas, my pick for National League Rookie of the Year. I'm just going to put that out there early. So take a look at those future
He runs
plays.
a little bit too. I mean, he may
He
steal
does.
a handful of bases too.
Yeah. And there's the spotlight there with, the Dodgers, one of the premier teams in baseball. I could see him getting a lot of love for Rookie of the Year. And hey, the Dodgers, they grow Rookie of the Years on trees in their history, their franchise.
Sure
So
do.
he could be the latest one. Moving on here to Tristan Casas with the Red Sox. We got a little bit of a look at him last year with the Red Sox after he had a good year down there in AAA, 889 OPS with 12 homers in 76 games in AAA. Then hit 197 with 5 homers over 27 games with the Red Sox down the stretch. And the Red Sox did let go Eric Hosmer. So, they're all in on Casas this season. I want to see a little bit more from Casas before I really trust him in mixed leagues, but certainly a ballpark you want to hit in. And he's shown an ability to, have good plate discipline as well. Everyone talks about the power. He's intriguing, but I'm not sure I would draft him in more of a shallow mixed league quite yet.
Yeah, I'm interested because of the walk strikeout rate. He walked
Yep.
20% of the time, which is gigantic, and he only struck out 24% of the time
Yep.
in Boston. And look, he hit 197, but with a 208 BABIP, I know he didn't have the greatest hard hit metrics, but that's going to correct. I'm not sure what type of major league player he's going to be, but the Red Sox are going to give him every opportunity. And Fenway Park, man, there's no foul territory. It's a great batting eye. It's just a great runs park. It's misunderstood. It's not really a great home run park, but it's a great park for offense. And I don't actually, as a Red Sox fan, I'm kind of a little bit talking myself into this lineup. I know everybody's mad because Bogarts went, but they didn't get him signed. They didn't handle it right. Bogarts probably wanted to stay and would have stayed if they were proactive about it, but at least they've locked up Devers. I thought Turner was an interesting signing. And, Casas is a guy, I don't think he's going to hit for a ton of power, but I know he's not going to hit 197 again. I think he could actually hit for a plus average. So I'm curious. He's somebody I would be considering as a possible bench fill. I think there's a plausible case for his upside.
Spencer Torkelson was a name that had a ton of hype just this time last year, but a lot can change in 1 year. You look at the rookie season he had, just hit 203, 8 home runs, 604 OPS over 110 games. Was somewhat better when he returned in September. Might be hard to see that hit just 219, but 9 extra base hits in 27 games. The strikeout rate got in check down the stretch, and he also hit the ball harder than he did before and lofted the ball a lot more. I think there's some upside here with Torkelson, and it looks like he's going to get every chance at playing time as well.
Yeah, still just 23. Look, if he plays, he's going to hit 20 to 25 home runs. The light goes on at different times and different cadences for different players. Progress as a player, development as a player is not linear. It's not like, okay, you're this good, then you're a little better, then you're a little better, then a little better. It's not like an SAT question. And these guys have different timetables and no pressure in Detroit. They're obviously not contending. They're in the midst of a rebuild. So he's somebody, again, it's a post-type sleeper because he didn't do anything last year. So everybody's off the scent. You'll get him probably cheaper than you did last year. I think he's somebody worth considering with a late pick.
So Matt Mervis is the other one. I think we should all keep an eye on there in Chicago. And like I said earlier, he's blocked for now. Eric Hosmer signed there during the offseason. And so I think he's probably going to start the year in AAA. Trey Mancini also signed there. So I just don't really see a path to playing time to start the year. But that's not necessarily the worst thing in the world, especially in drafts where you can have some reserve picks and have them at the ready. He was great in the minors last season, hit 36 home runs between 3 different levels, started the year in high A, made it all the way up to AAA. The numbers didn't suffer with those promotions. 24 years old, also had a good performance in the Arizona Fall League. So the hype is jumping for Mervis. So he's someone to watch. We'll see if he makes a push during spring training, but I would be surprised if he makes the opening day roster. But some excitement here at the position youth-wise.
Yeah, he may be one of those midseason call-ups to become excited about. And I was a little bit disappointed to see Hosmer and Mancini. Nothing against those guys. And I get that, look, they're getting Hosmer on somebody else's dime, basically. They're not paying almost any of his contracts. So I guess that makes sense. And, Mancini makes sense as the DH. But, Mervis is almost 25. And I think everything we saw last year is he's ready to get a chance at the major league level. I'm not sure what he's going to hit for average. A lot of the projection systems seem to have different opinions on him. Steamer has him as high as 258, but then the Bat has him as low as, I think, 235. So there's a lot of wiggle room there. But This may be the type of player you're picking up when the scuttlebutt midseason is, they're trying to trade Hosmer, or maybe he's been DFA'd or something, or Mancini gets hurt or something. Once they have an opening for Mervis, not only will he get called up and play, I mean, he might bat cleanup the next day. So he's somebody I'm interested in. I also want to give a shout out to my friend Sarah Sanchez, who covers the Cubs. Whenever I have a question on the Cubs, I always go to her because she follows the team super closely. It's just one of my favorite follows. And especially, she knows all about baseball, but especially the Cubs. She's a great resource. So make sure you're following Sarah for all your Cub needs.
Good call. Good call. All right. So we are going to get into our top 12 for first base. And I'm going to tee you up here, Scott. We're going to start out going 12 through 6, and then we'll go 5 through 1. So whenever you're ready, Scott.
Yeah, I have Andrew Vaughn 12th, and if you prefer to list him as an outfielder, I could be fine with Ryan Mountcastle here, but that's my number 12. Christian Walker. A lot of times those teams that don't contend have underappreciated fantasy assets. I have him number 11. I said I didn't want to draft into Rhys Hoskins, but he is number 10. CJ Cron, gravity always wins in Colorado. He's my 9 first baseman. Vinny Pasquantino, I do think I'll be out on him at his ADP, but I still rank him at a respectable 8th. Nathaniel Lowe in Texas had a really good season, hit for surprisingly high average at 7. Man, I thought Matt Olson was going to be a monster. Disappointing year, but still, it's a loaded lineup. He's young enough to bounce back. He still might hit 35 home runs in his sleep. Matt Olson, my number 6 first baseman.
So kind of similar names here. A little bit different toward the end. I have Christian Walker at 12. I just love the power there. And I actually like the Diamondbacks lineup too. I think they have a chance to be surprisingly potent. So I'm all in on Walker there. I have Ryan Mountcastle, number 11. The dimension changes in Baltimore hurt Mountcastle. Sure. No doubt about that. But he has top tier power, and he has power to all fields. I think that Orioles lineup is just going to get better as they promote more of their prospects. So I'm in on Mountcastle. I have Hoskins at number 10. I do think the power is going to be there. He's a 30-homer hitter in a favorable ballpark, and a lineup that will only get better as the season moves along once Harper returns. I have CJ Cron at number 9. I don't love Cron as a hitter, all things being equal. I'd say if there's a week where the Rockies are on the road, you don't want him in your lineup. But at Coors Field, he's an all-star. So you put all that together, end of season value, he's a top 10 first baseman to me, even if I don't love him as a hitter. Nathaniel Lowe, I have at number 8, a really good finish to last season, a great second half, has the quality of contact to back it up. And that Rangers front office, they are dead set on building a winner there. I like that Rangers lineup as well, so to get a piece of that with Lowe. I have Vinny Pasquantino at number 7. We talked about him a lot already. Excited to see what he can do. Not quite ready to put him in my top 6. I think there's just more proven names here, but I think the future's bright for Pasquantino. I have Jose Abreu at number 6. And again, we've talked a lot about Abreu, what he could potentially do in that Astros lineup. I think we're going to see a bounce back power-wise and counting stats. They'll be there, should hit for average too. I think he's pretty safe for, like you said earlier, outside the top 100 ADP. He's one of the safer picks you can get that late in the draft.
For sure, which is why I have him at number 5. If we would talk about the top guys, Paul Goldschmidt coming off an MVP season, aging gracefully in his 30s. He's my number 4 first baseman. Pete Alonso, maybe the best pure power hitter in the game, and that Mets lineup is super deep. There's a lot. I'm saying that a lot. There's a lot of lineups I want to invest in. I know you're a Mets fan. I got to get some Mets away from you this year when we're drafting against each other. Pete Alonso, my number 3 guy. And then I think it's a great debate, and I know we have different answers on this. I have Vladimir Guerrero at 2, Freddie Freeman at 1. I know a lot of people will have that the other way around. They'll both go with early picks. They're both going to be on the short list of MVP favorites. Maybe Guerrero gets a little bit of buzz because he hasn't won it yet. So if Guerrero was in the hunt, maybe people would want to give him an MVP where Freeman's already won it. But man, give me all the Freddie Freeman and Vladimir Guerrero you want, because you're not going to want to be sitting that out this year.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting debate because when you talk about ceiling, Vlad Jr. has the ceiling, but Freddie Freeman has the safer floor. So either way, I could see both perspectives with that. With me, I have Vlad Guerrero Jr. number 1 at first base just because of that potential ceiling there. But going back to number 5 for me, I have Matt Olson. And I think a bit of a disappointment in his first season with the Braves, replacing Freddie Freeman there. But I mean, his quality of contact is elite. Even last year, max exit velocity, 98th percentile, average exit velocity, 97th percentile, hard hit percentage, 96th, barrel percentage, 93. He's going to hit for power. We know that. The Braves lineup is very good, very deep. There's been a lot of teams we've said that about, but the weird thing about Matt Olson is this bouncing strikeout rate that he's had. It's been all over the place. In 2020, the pandemic shortened season, he had a strikeout rate of 31.4%. 2021 went down to 16.8%. Last year, 24.3%. So it's kind of all over the place. And the batting average, wherever it settles, I think is dependent upon where that strikeout rate falls. But I think another year in the National League, familiarizing himself with these pitchers in the National League East, I think could do him some favors there. I'm still really big on Matt Olson, even though he's my number 5.
Just at age 29 season, too. So this is a lot of baseball left in Matt Olson, too.
So more of a veteran here, Paul Goldschmidt at number 4, coming off an MVP season. Feels like people are sleeping on that, actually. He's coming off that MVP. But he's aging gracefully. Quality of contact metrics are still fantastic. Hit 35 homers last year. Even stole 7 bases. We thought of him as kind of being done from a speed perspective, but he still, fills up the box score, which you want to see there. And I like that Cardinals lineup. I think there's every reason to think he can be maybe not MVP caliber again, but still very good. But I'm going with the youth at number 3, Pete Alonso. I don't think we've seen his ceiling yet from a fantasy perspective. I know he had that rookie home run record, but made it back to 40 home runs last season, drove in 131 runs. It's hard to do much better than that, but I could see with the power that Pete Alonso has, he has a 50 homer season in him. He has another one. At some point, it's coming down the pike. And what I like about Pete Alonso is that he's not just a power hitter. You look at the way he's improved with the strikeout rate. Hit 271 last year. It's not crazy that he could hit 285, 290 one of these years, hit 50 homers. And again, it's hard to bank on 130 RBIs, but he could do that again with a lineup that is very, very good. So I have Pete Alonso at number 3, Freddie Freeman at number 2. The only question for me is how much power Freeman can hit for. That's the only reason I put him behind Vlad, who I think he could be a 40 homer hitter annually. And a lineup I really love there with the Blue Jays, like we mentioned a bit earlier. Vlad's quality of contact is elite as well. I think that the sky's the limit for Vlad, whereas Freeman is reliable as it gets at first base, but I think there's a healthy debate there, like you said.
It's interesting. So you look at NFBC ADP, and the top 30, the guys in the top 30 at this position are Goldschmidt at 27, Alonso at 20, Freeman at 13, and Vlad's at 11. I think you make the argument that Alonso is the best value of that group because he could easily win this tier. He's had a 53 home run season before. As you said, he hits for average. People lose that. It's easy to get caught up in the power with him. He's in the home run derby every year. He hits these tape measure home runs, but he's not like some 220 swing and miss guy. I mean, he's a really smart hitter. He has power to all fields. The Mets have put a tremendous lineup. Obviously, they've spent more money than anybody this year, and they put a great team on the field. If somebody said to me they wanted to draft Pete Alonso over Freeman or Guerrero, I wouldn't say you're wrong. I didn't rank them that way. But if you want to, again, if you're like in a salary cap league where you have a little bit more control over the shape of your roster and you get Alonso a couple of bucks cheaper than these other 2 guys, I'm fine with that. I think he's the best value of the 4. As far as Freeman and Guerrero, and maybe this is a weakness of me as a fantasy player, with early picks, sometimes I'm a little bit more floor driven. And I just think, when have I ever regretted a Freddie Freeman pick? Vladimir Guerrero is wonderful. The park is terrific. The fences are coming in. He's on the escalator. We haven't seen his best season yet. Vladimir Guerrero could win a home run title. He could win a batting title. He could be an MVP. It's in a park that looks like it's going to be Disneyland. These are all great things. And as you say, Freeman is more of a well-rounded player. He's not going to hit 45 home runs. I get it. But I don't know. I'm a little bit more floor-driven sometimes with these things. So that's why I have Freeman first. But if you and I were co-managing a team and our pick was on the clock and you wanted to pound the table for Guerrero, I think I'd be persuaded by that.
Yeah, I think they're both safe, I think, early. And they're likely to be off the board probably within the first 15 picks of any mixed league draft this spring. So I think it's interesting you bring up tiers, because I think Vlad and Freeman are in that first tier. Alonso, Goldschmidt, Olsen are in that second tier. Third tier for me, Abreu, Pasquantino, low. And then you go a bit lower, no pun intended, with Crone, Hoskins, Mountcastle, Walker, those kind of guys. Or to me, at that point, maybe you're thinking more like corner infielder. That's where you start to think when you get that late in the draft. But I think you can tier these guys out and make your plan based off that.
And interesting, I know we're not doing third base today, but I just look over at third base, and there's a little bit, not that first base is weak. I think first base is about average depth this year, but I feel like there's a little bit more juice at third base, to the point that maybe you might draft a third baseman before you draft a first baseman. Right now, I think there's 5 third basemen in the top 25 in ADP, although Bobby Witt qualifies at shortstop too. You may play him at shortstop, but I think there's just a little bit more bite at third base this year. This isn't always the case. I think first base for years was the safer position. Maybe your corner is more likely to be a third baseman this year.
Yeah, I could see that for sure. And there's a fun debate at third base to be had. We will definitely do that in a future episode. But Scott, this was a ton of fun. Like you said, Yahoo leagues are open for business right now. So we're going to have more data to work with as far as average draft position really soon as drafts start to ramp up there. But thanks again for joining me for this first episode. Once again, we're going to go position by position with these episodes. Second base is up next, and you can find that later this week on Thursday. So stay tuned for that. Make sure to subscribe to the show here, and also be sure to rate and review if you like what you're hearing. Scott is at Scott_Pianowski on Twitter. I'm at DJ Short. You can follow us there. Take care. We'll see you next time.